The first thing my father said when I walked into his birthday party was not hello, it was not how have you been or you look tired. He took one slow look at my uniform still dusty from travel, my hair pulled back too tight, my face drained from 2 days without sleep, and said in front of everyone, Rachel, you could have at least made yourself presentable. The room went quiet in that polite, uncomfortable way people do when they are not sure if they should laugh or look away. 30 guests stood around, holding glasses of wine, dressed in pressed shirts and soft colors, while I stood there in boots that had not seen rest in 48 hours. I had come straight from base, I had not even made it home yet, but none of that mattered in that moment because to him I did not look like someone who had just done something difficult. I looked like a problem. I forced a small smile and stepped inside, letting the door close behind me, as if that could soften what had just happened. My overnight bag felt heavier than it should have, hanging from my shoulder like it carried more than just clothes. Across the room, my brother Michael avoided eye contact, pretending to study his drink. My sister Lauren gave me a quick worried smile, but said nothing. No one ever said anything. That was the rule in our family, keep the peace even if it costs someone else everything. I should have turned around and left right then, but I did not, because a part of me still believed that maybe tonight would be different. Maybe this time he would see me. Maybe this time I would finally be enough. What no one in that room understood was where I had been just hours before. To them I had simply arrived late again, looking exhausted again, bringing that same quiet tension into a room that preferred easy conversations. But 12 hours earlier I was standing in a place where every decision mattered, not in a dramatic way, not in a movie scene kind of way, in a quiet, controlled kind of pressure where one wrong call could change everything. We had been working for nearly 2 straight days with barely any rest, moving from one problem to the next, solving things no one outside that world would ever hear about. There were people depending on us, people who did not have the luxury of waiting or hoping things would get better on their own. And when it was finally over, when everything settled just enough for us to step back, there was no celebration, no applause, just silence and the weight of knowing it could have gone very differently. That is what I carried into that house. Not pride, not excitement, just exhaustion and responsibility still sitting heavy on my shoulders. But standing there in my father's living room, none of that existed to them. I was just the daughter who never quite fit, the one who chose a path they did not understand, the one who kept showing up at the wrong time in the wrong way. And the truth is, part of me knew that I knew exactly how I looked walking into that room. I knew what people were thinking. Still I came anyway, because no matter how far I had gone, no matter how much I had done, there was still that quiet part of me that wanted one simple thing: to be seen by my own father as someone worth being proud of, not explained, not tolerated, just seen. My father, Richard Hayes, built his entire life on control of his business, his reputation, his image, and most of all how people saw him. Everything in that house reflected it: the polished floors, the carefully chosen artwork, the way every gathering felt more like a performance than a family moment. My brother Michael fit perfectly into that world. He was everything my father respected: successful, composed, predictable, a corporate attorney with the right connections, the right lifestyle, and the ability to say exactly what needed to be said in every room. Michael had learned early that approval came from staying within the lines, so he did, and it worked. My sister Lauren was different. She had a softer presence, the kind that tried to keep everyone calm. She filled the gaps, smoothed the tension, changed the subject when things got uncomfortable. Lauren believed if she just tried hard enough, she could keep the family from breaking apart. I used to believe that too, until I realized some things are not meant to be held together. And then there was me, the one who never fit into the version of life my father understood, the one who made choices he could not control or explain to his friends. I remember standing in the kitchen at 17 holding my acceptance letter. It was everything I had worked for, everything I thought would finally make him proud. My mother hugged me with tears in her eyes, but my father barely looked up. He just said, "Why would you choose a life like that?" That moment stayed with me longer than I ever admitted, not because of what he said, but because of what it meant. That no matter what I achieved, it would never look right to him, that I would always be measured against a standard I was never meant to meet. And somehow, even after all these years, a part of me was still trying to prove him wrong. Dinner started like every other gathering in that house, soft music in the background, quiet laughter, glasses clinking against polished wood, conversations about business, travel, investments, and things that sounded impressive but felt distant. I took a seat near the end of the table, hoping to stay unnoticed. That never lasted long. "So Rachel," my father said, cutting cleanly through the room, "still doing that field work of yours?" A few people glanced in my direction, curious but polite, something like that. I answered, keeping my tone steady. He leaned back slightly, studying me like I was something that needed to be explained. "You know, most people your age have settled down by now," he continued. "A home, a family, something stable." The word stable hung in the air longer than it Should have I felt my fingers tighten slightly around the edge of the table across from me. Michael shifted in his chair but said nothing. Lauren gave me a quick look like she wanted to interrupt but did not. I chose my path, I said quietly. Yes, you did, my father replied. And that is exactly the problem. A few guests lowered their eyes, focusing on their plates. No one wanted to be part of this, but no one stopped it either. You come in here looking like that, he continued, gesturing slightly toward my uniform, and expect people not to notice. I glanced down briefly at the faint marks along my sleeve. I came straight from base, I said. That is obvious, he replied, a short uncomfortable laugh moved through the room then disappeared just as quickly. It is not just how you look, Rachel, he went on, it is everything about it. You are almost 40 and still chasing something that does not even resemble a normal life. There it was, not loud, not explosive, just precise enough to land exactly where it always did. I could feel the weight of every eye in the room, even the ones pretending not to look. For a moment I considered explaining, telling them where I had been, what I had done, why I looked the way I did, but I already knew it would not matter because this was never about understanding, it was about judgment. And then he said it, you are an embarrassment. No anger in his voice, no hesitation, just certainty, and somehow that made it worse. For a second I did not feel anything, not anger, not embarrassment, not even surprise, just stillness, the kind that settles in when something finally stops trying to fight. I had heard versions of that sentence my whole life, different words, same meaning, never quite enough, never quite right, never what he had hoped for, but something about hearing it now in that room in front of people who barely knew me after everything I had just come from, it landed differently, not sharper, quieter, like a door closing instead of opening. I looked down at my plate, then back up at him, and for the first time I was not searching his face for approval. I was just seeing him clearly, a man who needed the world to make sense in a very specific way, and anything outside of that felt like a threat. I used to think if I explained myself better, if I worked harder, if I proved enough, he would understand, but standing there in that moment I realized something simple: he did understand, he just did not accept it, and those are not the same thing. The room stayed silent, waiting for a reaction, an argument, a defense, something to break the tension, but I did not give them that. I had nothing left to prove in that space. I leaned back slightly, letting out a slow breath, and that was when my phone vibrated in my pocket once, then again. I almost ignored it, but something in me shifted, and this time I answered. I stood up quietly before anyone could stop me. Excuse me, I said, though no one had actually spoken. I stepped away from the table, moving toward the hallway, where the noise softened just enough to think my phone was still vibrating in my hand. Unknown number, that alone was enough to get my attention. I answered in a low voice, Rachel Hayes. There was a brief pause on the other end, then a calm, controlled voice, Major Hayes, this is General Thomas Caldwell. Every part of me straightened instantly. Years of training do not fade no matter how exhausted you are. Yes, sir, we need you in Washington immediately, he said. No build-up, no explanation, just direct and clear. My grip tightened slightly around the phone. Is this regarding the recent operation? I asked. Another pause, shorter this time. It is no longer classified. I felt something shift in my chest behind me. I could still hear the low hum of conversation from the dining room, glasses moving, chairs shifting, people trying to recover from what had just happened. Two completely different worlds existing at the same time. Understood, I said. Transport is already en route, he continued. We will arrive within minutes. I glanced toward the front of the house instinctively, as if I could already see something coming. Yes, sir, I will be ready. The call ended as quickly as it began. I stood there for a moment staring at the screen as it went dark, then I slipped the phone back into my pocket and leaned lightly against the wall, not because I was overwhelmed, because I needed 1 second to reset, to separate what had just happened at that table from what was about to happen next. Then I pushed myself upright and walked back toward the dining room. When I stepped back into the dining room, nothing had really changed. People were still seated, still pretending the conversation mattered, but I could feel it, that quiet tension still hanging in the air like something unfinished. My father barely looked at me as I returned to my seat, as if the moment had already passed for him, as if what he said required no follow-up. I had just picked up my glass when the doorbell rang once, sharp and clear. The entire room paused, not dramatically, just enough for people to notice. Then one of the staff moved quickly toward the front of the house. A few guests exchanged small looks, then went back to their plates until the second sound came, voices lower this time, but different, more formal. Something about it made people pay attention. Footsteps approached again, faster now. Then the staff member appeared in the doorway. He looked composed, but there was something off in his expression. Sir, he said carefully, looking toward my father, there is someone here asking for Major Hayes. The words did not fully register at first, not for anyone in that room. My father frowned slightly, a hesitation. He was not used to showing. Asking for who? For Major Rachel Hayes, he repeated, and then the room shifted, not loudly, not suddenly, just enough for people to start looking at me instead of past me. I set my glass down slowly and stood. I will take that, I said. No one stopped me, no one spoke. As I walked toward the front of the house I could feel every eye following me, curiosity replacing discomfort, confusion replacing judgment, and when I reached the door and opened it everything changed. Standing on the front steps was a man in full dress uniform, 4 stars on his shoulders, composed, steady, unmistakable. General Thomas Caldwell. Behind him 2 officers stood near a dark vehicle waiting in complete silence. The rain had slowed to a light steady fall, but none of them seemed to notice. The second he saw me his posture shifted. Major Hayes. I straightened instinctively despite the weight in my body. Sir. Then something happened that I did not expect. He saluted first, not casually, not out of routine, deliberate, respectful. I returned it immediately. Behind me I could feel movement as people from the dining room began to gather near the hallway. Watching, trying to understand. General Caldwell stepped inside. Only after I moved aside my father appeared moments later, his expression already changing into something more controlled, more presentable. General, I am Richard Hayes. Caldwell acknowledged him briefly with a nod, but did not shift his focus for long. Mr. Hayes. Then he turned back to me. I apologize for the interruption, but this could not wait. Of course, sir, I said. The room had gone completely silent now. Guests stood near their chairs, some still holding glasses, unsure whether to move or stay still. Caldwell looked around once, then spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. Earlier today a coordinated operation was carried out involving multiple civilian recoveries overseas. Several heads turned toward the television in the next room where a quiet news report had already begun. What they did not know, he continued, is that the success of that operation depended heavily on the leadership and decision-making of one individual. He paused just long enough for the weight of that statement to settle. Then he continued. Major Rachel Hayes led the final phase of that mission, ensuring that every civilian involved was safely brought out under extremely difficult conditions. No exaggeration in his tone, no attempt to impress, just facts, but the effect was immediate. I could hear someone take a sharp breath. Another set a glass down too quickly. Caldwell did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Your daughter, he said, turning slightly toward my father, demonstrated exceptional judgment under pressure and refused to step away when the situation demanded more. He let that sentence land before adding, there are people alive tonight because she stayed. The room changed in that moment, not louder, not emotional, just different, because suddenly they were not looking at me as someone who did not belong. They were looking at someone they had completely misunderstood. For a long moment no one spoke, not because they did not know what to say, because there was nothing left that would not sound small. I did not look at my father right away. I did not need to. I could feel it, that shift. The same man who had just dismissed me in front of everyone was now standing completely still, trying to process something he had never allowed himself to consider. When I finally turned toward him, he was already looking at me, not at my uniform, not at the marks on my sleeve, at me, really looking. His expression was not pride, not yet. It was confusion first, then something deeper, something uncomfortable, as if 2 versions of reality were colliding, and he did not know which one to hold on to. He glanced briefly toward the general, then back at me, and for the first time that night he did not have something ready to say. No correction, no judgment, no control, just silence, the kind that comes when certainty disappears around us. The guests had gone completely still. People who had been so confident in their quiet assumptions minutes ago now avoided eye contact for a different reason, not discomfort, recognition. My father shifted his weight slightly as if trying to steady himself. I could see it now, not just surprise, regret, not loud, not dramatic, but present and growing, because the truth had not changed who I was. It had only revealed it, and that meant the way he had treated me had nothing to do with misunderstanding. It had been a choice. That realization does not come easily, and it does not leave quickly. The room slowly began to move again. Quiet conversations, low voices, people trying to process what they had just heard. General Caldwell stepped back, giving space without saying it out loud. I could feel my father watching me, waiting. When I turned toward the hallway, he followed, not quickly, not confidently, just enough to keep me from walking away without a word. Rachel, he said. I stopped, but did not turn right away. For years that voice had carried authority, expectation, pressure. Now it sounded different, uncertain. I faced him calmly. Yes. He opened his mouth, then paused, like he was searching for something that had never come naturally to him. I did not know, he said finally. The sentence hung there incomplete. I held his gaze. No, you did not, I answered. Another pause. If I had known. He started again. I shook my head slightly, stopping him before he could finish. That is not the point. My voice stayed even, not cold, not emotional, just clear. For a second he looked confused, as if he expected anger or relief or something easier to respond to. You think this changes something? I continued. That if the right person tells you I did something worth respecting, then suddenly I become someone different. He did not answer because he could Not I took a slow breath. I spent most of my life trying to explain myself to you, trying to make choices you would understand, trying to earn something that always seemed just out of reach. My hand stayed steady at my sides, but I am not doing that anymore. The words came out simple, without force. I do not need you to agree with my life, and I do not need you to approve of it. That was the part that landed, not because it was harsh, because it was final. He looked at me like he wanted to say something else, something that might fix what had already been said, but some things do not get fixed in one moment, and for the first time I was not waiting for him to try. I did not wait for him to respond. There was nothing he could say in that moment that would change what had already shifted. I turned and walked back toward the front of the house. The sound of quiet conversation followed behind me, but it felt distant now, like something I had already stepped away from. General Caldwell was waiting near the door. He did not ask questions. He did not need to. Ready, he said. I nodded. Once outside, the air felt different, cooler, clearer. The rain had stopped, but the ground still held its trace. The dark vehicle waited at the curb, lights reflecting softly against the wet pavement. For a brief second I paused at the top of the steps, not to look back, just to take in the moment. Everything that had just happened felt sharp, but also strangely settled, like something that had been building for years had finally reached its end. Behind me I heard my name, Rachel. My father, not loud, not demanding, just calling. I closed my eyes for half a second, then opened them again and kept walking, because some decisions are not about anger, they are about clarity. I stepped into the vehicle and the door closed with a quiet final sound. As it pulled away from the curb, I did not turn around, not because it did not matter, but because for the first time I understood that I did not need to. The city moved quietly outside the window as we drove. Streetlights passed in steady intervals, casting brief shadows across the glass. I leaned back against the seat, letting the silence settle. General Caldwell sat across from me, not speaking, giving me space to breathe. That kind of silence is rare, the kind that does not demand anything from you. My body was finally starting to feel everything I had been pushing aside, the exhaustion, the tension, the weight of the past 2 days, but underneath all of it there was something else. Clarity, not sudden, not dramatic, just steady. For years I had measured myself against a standard that was never mine, trying to fit into a version of success that did not match the life I had chosen, and every time I fell short of that expectation it felt like failure. But sitting there in that quiet moment I could see it differently. Nothing about what I had done required approval to be valid. It never had. The work, the responsibility, the decisions that affected real people, those things stood on their own. They did not become meaningful only when someone recognized them. I watched my reflection faintly in the glass, tired but steady, and for the first time in a long time I was not questioning whether I had done enough. I already knew the answer, and that changed everything. It was early morning by the time my phone vibrated again. I glanced at the screen. My father. I let it ring once before answering. Rachel, he said. His voice sounded different, quieter, not controlled, not rehearsed, just honest in a way I had rarely heard before. I have been thinking about tonight, he continued. There was a pause, not because he was searching for words, because he was choosing them carefully. I did not understand, he said, and I should have. Another pause, longer this time. I could hear the weight in it. I thought I was protecting you, he added, but I see now that I was doing the opposite. I leaned back slightly, listening but not interrupting. For years I convinced myself that if I pushed you hard enough you would choose a different path, something safer, something I could understand. His voice softened. I did not realize I was pushing you away. Instead, the words were not perfect, they did not erase anything, but they were real, and sometimes that is where change begins. I did not respond right away, not because I did not care, because for once I was not rushing to fix the moment, I was just letting it be what it was. A few days later he came to see me. No announcement, no gathering, no audience, just him standing outside my place early in the morning, holding 2 cups of coffee, like he was not sure what else to bring. When I opened the door he did not speak right away. He just looked at me, not quickly, not critically, carefully, as if he was seeing something he had missed for a long time. You look tired, he said. It was a simple sentence, but it felt different. There was no judgment in it, only concern. I stepped aside and let him in. We sat across from each other at the small table near the window. No long speech, no attempt to fix everything at once, just a quiet conversation that moved slowly. He asked questions this time, listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak he did not try to reshape my answers, he just accepted them. That did not erase the past, but it changed the present, because respect is not built in one moment, it is built in how people choose to show up after. There is something people do not talk about enough. Not all wounds come from strangers, some of the deepest ones come from the people we spend years trying to impress: parents, partners, family, the ones whose approval feels like it should come naturally but does not. And the truth is, if you spend your life chasing validation from someone who cannot give it, you will always feel like you are falling short. No matter how much you achieve, no matter how much you give. Rachel did not become stronger the moment her father understood her. She became stronger the moment she stopped needing him to. That is the difference, and maybe that is the part that matters most. So if you have ever felt unseen in your own family, if you have ever questioned your worth because someone close to you could not recognize it, remember this: your value does not begin when someone else decides to see it. It was always there. If this story meant something to you, let me know where you are watching from and what part stayed with you the most. Your story matters too, and if you want more real stories like this, do not forget to subscribe.